Tonight, somewhere between 9 and 11 o'clock, you will lie down and pick a side, left or right. You picked one decades ago, as a child, without any information, and you have repeated that same choice roughly 20,000 times since. Nobody sat you down and asked why. No doctor has ever put it on a form. No health checkup has a box for it. And yet the side you choose determines the direction gravity pulls the acid in your stomach, the blood returning to your heart, the fluid draining from your tissues, and the waste clearing out of your brain, for the next 8 hours, every single night, for the rest of your life. Gravity does not clock out when you fall asleep. It keeps working on every fluid inside you, in whatever direction your body happens to be pointing. And the reason direction matters at all is that your body is not built symmetrically on the inside. Your heart sits left of center. Your stomach curves toward the left. Your aorta runs down the left side of your spine, while the large vein bringing blood back up runs along the right. Your biggest lymphatic vessel, the one draining 3/4 of your entire body, empties into a single point, on the left. None of this is random. It is the layout your body settled into before you were born, and it has been asymmetric ever since. Most people choose a sleeping position based on comfort. Which shoulder feels better against the mattress? Which hip likes to take the weight? Which way you've always faced? The internal anatomy is invisible to you. It is not invisible to gravity. For 8 hours a night, roughly a third of your entire life, gravity is quietly rewarding one position and quietly working against the other, and almost nobody has ever been told which is which. This matters more after 60 than it did at 30, for a specific reason. Every system this script covers, the valve at the top of your stomach, the vein feeding your heart, the drainage network clearing your tissues, the brain's overnight cleaning cycle, declines with age. The muscle that holds your stomach acid in place loosens. The vein compresses more easily under the same body weight. The brain's waste-clearing channels narrow. At 30, any sleeping position works fine because the underlying systems have enough reserve to absorb a bad angle. At 60, the reserve is smaller, and the position you choose starts to matter in a way it never used to. This is not a mattress video. It is not a pillow advertisement. It is what happens night after night when a body with asymmetric organs lies down in a gravitational field that never turns off. Doctors who specialize in reflux tell their patients to sleep on the left. Doctors who specialize in cardiovascular health recommend left-side sleeping in specific conditions. Sleep researchers studying brain waste clearance keep landing on the same side. 3 completely separate fields of medicine, working independently, arriving at the same physical answer for 3 completely different reasons. That convergence is the reason this topic is worth 40 minutes of your attention. We're going to walk through 4 systems in your body, one at a time. The stomach and the acid that can wake you at 2 in the morning. The heart and the vein that feeds it. The lymphatic system nobody teaches you about in school. And the brain's overnight cleaning crew, discovered only in 2012. Then we'll cover what the other positions, right side, back, stomach, actually offer, because none of this is as simple as left side always wins. And we'll finish with the part that actually matters if you've slept the same way for 40 years. How you retrain a habit that old without lying awake fighting your own body. By the end, you'll know something almost nobody in your life has ever been told. The side you sleep on is not a preference. It's a physics problem your body has been solving, correctly or incorrectly, every single night without your permission. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Start with the organ you'll feel first if you get this wrong, because nighttime reflux is not really a chemistry problem. It's a geometry problem, and the geometry is specific enough to draw. Your stomach is not a round bag. It's shaped more like the letter J, with the opening from your esophagus at the top and the exit into your intestine down at the bottom right. The greater curve of that J, the wide outer curve, bulges out to the left. Above that curve sits the fundus, a dome that acts like a small reservoir for the air you swallow with every meal. Lie on your left side, and that greater curve becomes the lowest point in the whole stomach. Food, acid, and digestive juices settle down into it, below the level of the junction where your esophagus meets your stomach. The fundus, full of gas, floats above the liquid, the same way an upside-down bottle keeps its air pocket at the top. The exit valve at the bottom sits higher than the pooled contents, so digestion drains downhill, assisted by gravity instead of fighting it. Roll onto your right side and the whole picture flips. The greater curve is now on top. Everything that was settled at the bottom slides toward the junction with your esophagus instead, the exact point your body is trying to keep sealed. The gas-filled fundus, now underneath the liquid, pushes upward against that seal from below. The muscle responsible for holding the line, called the lower esophageal sphincter, has to resist both the weight of the liquid pressing against it and the gas pressure pushing from beneath. On the left side, that muscle has almost nothing to resist. On the right side, it's working against both liquid and gas at once, for hours, while you're unconscious. This isn't a hypothesis. Researchers publishing in the American Journal of Gastroenterology measured it directly, using probes that track acid exposure through the night. Sleeping on the right side produced significantly more reflux episodes than sleeping on the left. Acid exposure time in the lower esophagus ran roughly 50% higher on the right side compared to the left. Nothing else changed between the 2 nights. Same stomach, same meal, same acid, same muscle. The only variable was which side of the body was touching the mattress. What makes this relevant specifically after 60 is that the lower esophageal sphincter was built to hold pressure coming from below, from a person standing upright, with gravity helping the muscle keep the seal shut. That's the geometry it evolved for. But the tone in that muscle weakens with age, the same way grip strength or skin elasticity weakens. A sphincter that held firm at 30 regardless of position can start leaking at 55, and by 60, it may only hold if gravity is helping rather than working against it. The muscle you had in your 30s could survive sleeping on the wrong side without complaint. The muscle you have now may not be able to. If you take medication for reflux and you're still waking up with a bitter taste, a burning chest, or a cough that never fully clears, consider what the medication is actually doing. A proton pump inhibitor lowers how acidic the fluid in your stomach is. It does nothing about where that fluid goes. Less acidic liquid sitting against the valve for 8 hours can still irritate the tissue, still trigger a cough reflex, still cause the microscopic aspiration that leaves your throat hoarse in the morning. The medicine treats the chemistry. It leaves the geometry completely untouched. In the reflux study above, changing sides alone cut acid exposure by half, with no change in medication at all. If you're on treatment and still symptomatic, the question worth asking isn't whether the dose is strong enough. It's which side of your body the treated acid has been pooling against all night. None of this requires anything expensive or complicated. It requires knowing which side is doing the work for you and which side is working against you. And the stomach, it turns out, is only the first organ in this story, with a strong opinion about which way you're facing. Run your hand down the middle of your back and you're tracing roughly where your spine sits. On the right side of that spine runs a vessel most people have never heard of, the inferior vena cava, the largest vein in your body, responsible for carrying blood from your legs, kidneys, and liver back up to your heart. Lie on your right side and the weight of everything above that vein, your abdominal organs, your body mass, gravity itself, presses the vein against your spine. It doesn't shut the vessel completely. It narrows it, the way a garden hose still passes water when you step on it, just less of it. Less blood makes it back to the heart per beat. The heart, receiving a smaller fill than it was built to expect, has to work slightly harder or beat slightly faster to move the same amount of blood around your body. Lie on your left side and the vein is left alone. Nothing compresses it. Blood returns at full volume. The heart fills properly with every beat, and it does its job at a lower, more efficient workload. This effect is easiest to see in pregnancy, where a growing uterus can compress that same vein dramatically enough to drop a mother's blood pressure when she lies flat on her back, which is exactly why left-side sleeping is the standard advice given to every pregnant woman. But the vein runs along the right side of everybody's spine, pregnant or not. The compression in a non-pregnant adult is smaller, but the mechanism is identical, and it runs for 8 hours a night, every night, for years. You won't feel this happening. Nobody consciously notices a partially compressed vein, but your cardiovascular system does register it through the same reflexes that adjust your heart rate to blood pressure changes throughout the day. Across a single night, the difference is nothing you'd measure on a home blood pressure cuff. Across years of nights, spent consistently on one side rather than the other, it becomes a workload your heart performed that it never needed to perform. A heart that fills fully every night, runs at a steadier rate, and moves blood more efficiently, using less oxygen to do the same job as a heart that spends 8 hours fighting a narrowed supply line. There's a second, more direct reason your heart prefers the left side, and it has nothing to do with veins. Your heart doesn't sit centered in your chest. It sits toward the left, tucked into a natural notch in your left lung, suspended by its own major blood vessels inside a fluid-filled sac called the pericardium. Lie on your left side, and gravity settles the heart into that notch the way it was designed to rest. Lie on your right side, and the heart, still hanging from those same vessels, shifts slightly across your chest, pulled by gravity in a direction it wasn't built for. In a healthy young heart, this shift is too small to matter. But the prevalence of an enlarged heart, fluid around the heart, or valve disease all increase substantially after 65. In those hearts, some patients report a distinct awareness of their own heartbeat, or mild breathlessness, specifically when lying on the right side, a sensation that disappears when they roll left. The muscle itself hasn't changed. The angle it's hanging at has. Put both mechanisms together and you get a simple, testable idea. For the 8 hours every night when your heart is supposed to be resting and repairing, the left side gives it a fuller vein and a properly supported chamber. The right side gives it neither. On any single night, the difference is invisible. Added up across years of choosing the same side without thinking about it, and it stops being invisible. It becomes a pattern your cardiovascular system has been running in the background of your entire adult life. There's a network running through your entire body that most people finish school never having heard of, despite it doing work every single hour of the day, the lymphatic system. It collects excess fluid from between your cells, filters it through lymph nodes, and returns it to your bloodstream. Unlike your circulatory system, it has no central pump, no heart equivalent pushing it along. It depends entirely on outside forces, muscle movement, the rhythm of breathing, and gravity to keep fluid moving. Almost all of that fluid, roughly 3/4 of it, funnels through a single vessel called the thoracic duct, which drains into your bloodstream at exactly one junction point, where the internal jugular vein meets the subclavian vein, on the left side of your neck. One draining point for most of the fluid in your entire body, and it sits on the left. During the day, your muscles contract as you walk and move, squeezing lymphatic vessels and helping push fluid toward that drainage point, regardless of which direction it has to travel. At night, when you're mostly still and your breathing is shallow, that muscular pump switches off. Gravity becomes the main force left doing the work, and whether gravity helps or hinders now depends entirely on which side you're lying on. Sleep on your left side, and that single drainage point sits at a lower position than much of the network feeding into it. Fluid flows downhill toward the exit, the way it's supposed to. Sleep on your right side, and the drainage point is now higher than the network it serves. Lymph, moving through thin, low-pressure vessels with no pump behind it, has to travel uphill against gravity to reach the same exit. This is very likely the explanation behind something almost everyone over 50 has noticed and never questioned: waking up with puffy hands, a tight wedding ring, or slightly swollen ankles, and finding it resolves within an hour of getting up and moving around. That puffiness is fluid your lymphatic system should have collected and returned to your bloodstream overnight. Once you're upright and moving, gravity and muscle contraction both start helping again, and the fluid finally drains. The swelling wasn't a mystery. It was gravity working against a drainage system for 8 straight hours, correcting itself the moment you stood up. This matters beyond comfort, because your lymph nodes are also where your immune system does a large part of its surveillance work, filtering out pathogens, presenting threats to immune cells, clearing away cellular debris from tissue repair. The overnight hours are when your body does its most intensive repair, which means overnight lymphatic flow is directly tied to how effectively your immune system can do its job while you sleep. A drainage system running at full speed on the left side and running uphill on the right side isn't a cosmetic difference. It's a difference in how well your body clears waste and monitors for threats during the hours it depends on that clearance most. None of this is dramatic on any given night. Nobody's immune system fails because they slept on their right side once. But this is a pattern that operates identically, every night, for however many decades you've had a habitual sleeping position, which for most people is every night since childhood. 3/4 of your body's fluid clearance, running either downhill or uphill, depending entirely on a choice you've never once been asked to think about. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. In 2012, a research group at the University of Rochester, led by Maiken Nedergaard, discovered something that changed how sleep itself is understood. The brain has its own dedicated waste clearance system, now called the glymphatic system, and it runs almost exclusively while you're asleep. Cerebrospinal fluid flows along channels that surround the blood vessels entering your brain, picks up metabolic waste, including a protein called amyloid beta, the same protein associated with Alzheimer's disease, and carries it out through a separate set of drainage channels. During waking hours, this system runs at a fraction of its capacity. It's during sleep that the space between brain cells actually expands, by roughly 60%, cutting resistance to fluid flow and letting the glymphatic system run at full speed. Your brain, in a very real sense, waits for you to fall asleep before it starts cleaning up after itself. The rate of that cleaning depends on fluid dynamics, and fluid dynamics depend on angle. Fluid moves faster through a channel when gravity is pulling in the same direction it's already trying to flow, and slower, or not at all, when gravity is working against it. Sleep position sets that angle for 8 hours every night. A study published in the Journal of Neuroscience in 2015 tracked this directly in an animal model. Clearance of amyloid beta tracer from brain tissue was fastest in the side sleeping position and slowest lying flat on the back or on the stomach. Side sleeping wins clearly over the other two. What the study didn't establish is whether left side beats right side specifically. It measured lateral sleeping as a category, not the two sides against each other. There is a reasonable anatomical argument for the left side specifically, though it hasn't yet been confirmed with direct measurement. Most people's right jugular vein is the dominant one, carrying the majority of blood draining out of the brain. Sleep on your left side, and that dominant vein sits on top, in the position gravity would favor for efficient drainage. It's a sound piece of reasoning built on real anatomy. It is not, as of now, a directly measured finding in humans. Worth being honest about that distinction, rather than overstating it. What is well established, separate from the glymphatic question entirely, is that lying flat on your back raises pressure inside your skull compared to lying on your side. That matters for two specific reasons. First, pressure inside the eye rises during back sleeping, and elevated overnight eye pressure is a documented risk factor in the progression of normal tension glaucoma, a form of the disease where damage happens despite pressure readings looking normal during the day. If you or someone in your family has been told to watch for glaucoma, sleep position is a variable that rarely comes up at an eye appointment, and it's a modifiable one. Second, chronically elevated pressure inside the skull, even without a specific structural cause, is linked to headaches and visual disturbance. Side sleeping lowers that baseline pressure, Back sleeping raises it. Why does any of this matter more after 60 than it did at 30? Because the glymphatic system, like every other system in this script, loses efficiency with age. The channels narrow. The fluid flow that cleared waste at full speed decades ago runs measurably slower now. The gap between any position is fine and position actually matters widens every year past 50, precisely because the reserve capacity that used to absorb a bad angle keeps shrinking. A 25-year-old's brain can probably clear waste adequately regardless of which way they're facing. A brain approaching 70 has far less room for the angle to be working against it rather than with it. Nobody at a memory clinic asks which side of the bed you sleep on. No prescription for blood pressure or cholesterol comes with a note about sleep position. And yet for 8 hours a night, every night, this is one more variable quietly determining how efficiently your brain is doing the one job it can only fully do while you're unconscious. None of this means the left side wins every category for every person, and it would be dishonest to present it that way. The right side, the back, and even the stomach each have specific circumstances where they're the better choice, and understanding the trade-offs matters more than memorizing a single rule. Start with the right side. Your liver, a heavy organ sitting in your upper right abdomen, rests supported against your rib cage when you lie on your right side. Lie on your left instead, and the liver hangs from its own ligaments, pulling slightly on the diaphragm above it. For most people, this is irrelevant. For someone with an enlarged liver, from fatty liver disease or another condition, it can produce real discomfort, and right-side sleeping is the more comfortable option. There's also evidence, though mixed, that right-side sleeping is associated with a lower resting heart rate, possibly through gentler pressure on a nerve running through the chest. And for anyone managing a condition affecting only one lung, pulmonologists sometimes specifically recommend sleeping with the healthier lung on the dependent side, because more blood flow gets directed to whichever lung is lower, and you want that extra flow going to the lung doing the better job of gas exchange. For most people over 50, though, these advantages are outweighed by the reflux cost covered in Chapter 2. Between 20 and 40% of adults past 50 deal with some level of acid reflux, and for that large group, the liver and heart rate benefits of the right side don't outweigh a valve being bathed in acid for 8 hours. Then there's the back, which offers something neither side position can match: completely neutral spinal alignment, no twisting, no asymmetric pressure on one hip or shoulder, weight spread evenly across your whole back. For anyone dealing with degenerative disc disease or chronic back pain that worsens on their side, lying flat may genuinely be the least painful option available. Against that spinal advantage sits the single biggest risk in this entire script: airway collapse. Lying on your back lets gravity pull your tongue and the soft tissue at the back of your throat backward, narrowing your airway. In a meta-analysis of the sleep apnea literature, researchers found that roughly 56% of all diagnosed sleep apnea is positional, meaning the airway obstruction happens mainly, or only, when the person is lying on their back. More than half of all sleep apnea in the research is essentially a consequence of one sleeping position. For someone with both chronic back pain and any degree of sleep-disordered breathing, side sleeping with a pillow between the knees to keep the spine aligned solves both problems at once, offering nearly the same spinal support as lying flat while keeping the airway open. Side sleeping itself, on either side, carries a cost the back avoids: pressure on the lower shoulder and hip. 8 hours of body weight resting on the same shoulder joint can narrow the space where the rotator cuff tendons pass, aggravating existing shoulder problems. The same weight resting on the same hip, night after night for years, is strongly associated with a specific kind of hip pain called trochanteric bursitis, almost always worse on the habitual sleeping side. The fix isn't switching to the back and losing every organ benefit discussed so far. It's often as simple as a mattress with enough give for the shoulder to sink in slightly, drawing the lower arm forward so weight lands on the chest rather than the point of the shoulder, and a pillow between the knees to take pressure off the hip. Turning 60 changes this calculation, because 3 separate systems weaken with age, and each one raises the stakes of getting position wrong. The muscle tone holding your airway open during sleep declines, which is part of why sleep apnea becomes more common with age. An airway that stayed open lying flat at 30 may not stay open at 60. The valve at the top of your stomach loses tone, as covered earlier, turning a minor positional disadvantage into actual reflux. And for people managing high blood pressure or heart failure, sleeping on the back can partially compress that large vein discussed in Chapter 3, reducing how efficiently blood pressure naturally dips during sleep, a dip your body relies on to protect your cardiovascular system overnight. Left side sleeping supports that natural dip. Back sleeping, in these specific conditions, can blunt it. None of these systems failed suddenly at 60. They've been quietly losing capacity for years. What changes is that the margin for error narrows, and a sleeping position that made no measurable difference in your 30s can start making a real one now. Knowing all of this changes nothing if you can't actually adopt the position, and here's the honest difficulty. Your sleeping position is one of the most deeply grooved motor habits in your entire body. You've been doing it the same way, without conscious thought, for decades. The rolling, the adjusting, the resettling that happens throughout the night runs on a motor program your nervous system locked in years ago, and it operates completely below conscious awareness. Trying to force a new position through willpower alone tends to fail, because willpower is a waking hours tool, and this problem exists mostly in the hours when you're unconscious. What actually works, based on how sleep position retraining studies are typically run, is working with that unconscious motor system rather than against it. A pillow wedged behind your back creates a physical boundary your sleeping brain will respect and roll against, without needing to wake up and consciously correct itself. A slight incline favoring the target side works the same way. These aren't permanent fixtures. They're training wheels for a nervous system relearning a position it hasn't held all night in decades. Expect the first few nights to feel genuinely strange. Your body is used to a different distribution of pressure, a different shoulder angle, a different hip load, and unfamiliarity on its own can trigger a mild alertness that makes falling asleep harder. That's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's your motor system noticing something new, the same low-level resistance you'd feel adjusting to any unfamiliar physical routine. If shoulder or hip discomfort makes left side sleeping hard to tolerate at first, the fix is support, not surrender. A pillow between your knees reduces strain on the hip and helps keep your pelvis aligned. Support under your rib cage, so your top shoulder isn't bearing the full weight of your upper body, reduces the compression that causes morning stiffness. The goal isn't to grit your teeth through discomfort for the sake of the physics. It's to distribute your weight well enough that the new position becomes as comfortable as the old one, not despite the change but because of proper support. Give it 2 to 4 weeks. That's the window that repeatedly shows up in habit formation research for a new sleeping position, to stop feeling deliberate and start feeling automatic. Somewhere in that window, your nervous system quietly updates its default, the props become optional, and you stop thinking about which side you're on, because your body has simply learned a new one. None of this requires giving up the back entirely, or never sleeping on your right side again. If your spine needs the neutral support only lying flat provides, and you don't snore or show signs of sleep apnea, back sleeping remains a reasonable choice. If liver discomfort or a single lung condition makes the right side genuinely more comfortable, that trade-off is legitimate too. This isn't about rigid rule following. It's about finally knowing what each choice costs and what it protects, instead of defaulting to whichever side felt comfortable as a child and never revisiting the question since. The last half hour adds up to this. Your stomach acid stays where it belongs when the valve isn't fighting gravity as well as chemistry. Your heart fills more fully when the vein feeding it isn't pinned under your own body weight. 3/4 of your body's fluid drainage runs downhill instead of uphill. And your brain's overnight cleaning system, the one discovered barely more than a decade ago, runs closer to its full capacity through channels that only get narrower with each passing year. 4 separate systems, 4 separate lines of evidence, built by different researchers, studying different organs for different reasons, all converging on the same physical direction. Tonight, you'll lie down and choose a side, the way you have every night of your life. The only thing that's changed is that now you know what that choice is actually doing while you sleep. The physics was running the whole time, whether anyone told you about it or not. Now you know. And the choice, for once, is one you get to make on purpose. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.